The maple leaves outside the Fairmont ballroom were turning the color of old rust, and I remember thinking they looked like something burning at the edges. I was standing near the window with a glass of Riesling in my hand. Wearing the dress my father had once said made me look too serious for a party. When my uncle stepped up to the microphone and announced he was giving away my business to my brother. Not his business. Mine. 200 people in that room. Colleagues. Family friends. Neighbors who had watched me grow up delivering flyers in the rain to save money for a laptop. They all applauded. My brother, Daniel, threw both arms in the air like he'd just scored in overtime. His girlfriend, Paige, shrieked and grabbed his sleeve. My uncle Raymond, the man who had been managing our family's affairs since my grandfather passed, stood at that podium with the look of a man who believed, down to his bones, that he had just done something generous. He had just handed my brother the controlling shares of Northgate Analytical Solutions, the software company I had built from a rented basement suite in Kitchener over the past 6 years. I didn't throw my wine. I didn't cross the room. I didn't even raise my voice. I just stood there by that window and let the applause wash over me like cold water. And I thought they have no idea what they just stepped into. My name is Claire. And I'm 31 years old. To my family, I am the quiet one. The one who reads too much. Works too late. Skips Christmas dinners because of deadlines. To my clients in the financial technology sector, the banks, the compliance firms, the provincial regulators who license my software, I am something else entirely. I build systems that detect fraud, pattern recognition, anomaly flagging, audit l'automation. I have spent 6 years teaching machines to notice when something is wrong before the humans in the room figure it out. Ironic. Given what was happening in that room right now, I need to tell you how this started. Not tonight. Not with the applause and the champagne, and my uncle's self-satisfied smile. It started 14 months ago. On a Tuesday afternoon in October. When my father called me from his condo in Burlington and told me he needed help. My father, Gerald, is not a bad man. I want to be honest about that. He is a man who loves his children unevenly. The way some people water plants, more attention to the ones that seem to need it. Less to the ones that appear to be doing fine on their own. I appeared to be doing fine. I had always appeared to be doing fine. That was my problem. Daniel is 4 years older than me. He has my father's jawline, and my grandfather's ability to walk into a room and make people feel like they'd been waiting for him. He is charming and warm, and he has never, in his adult life, held a job for longer than 18 months. He is also, I would learn much later, accumulated $340. 0 inches personal debt across 3 failed ventures, a craft brewery in Hamilton that closed after 2 years, a real estate coaching business that collected deposits and delivered nothing, and a renovation company that left 4 homeowners with unfinished kitchens and no recourse. My father knew about some of this. My uncle Raymond knew about all of it. When my father called me that October, he said he was worried about the future. He was 67. His knees were bad. He wanted to feel like the family was settled before he got older. He asked me, very carefully, whether I would consider bringing Daniel into Northgate in some kind of official capacity. Not ownership. Not control. Just a role. Something that looked good on paper. Something that gave Daniel stability. I said I would think about it. I thought about it for 3 weeks. I consulted my lawyer. A woman named Priya, who has the particular gift of saying difficult things without making them sound cruel. Priya told me that any formal role for Daniel would need to be structured carefully to protect the company's existing shareholder agreement. I told her I understood. We drafted a limited advisory contract. No equity. No voting rights. A 6-month trial, with a modest stipend. I emailed it to my father. He never replied. What I did not know was that my father had also been talking to Raymond. Raymond is my father's older brother. He is the kind of person who describes himself as a straight shooter, while saying things sideways. He has a financial planning background. 2 decades out of date. And an unshakable belief that family assets exist to be redistributed according to need rather than effort. He managed my grandfather's estate after he passed in 2019. And he has been managing my father's affairs. Loosely. Ever since. I did not know that Raymond had been telling my father for months that the fairest thing, the family thing, would be to transfer a majority stake in Northgate to Daniel before Gerald's health declined further. I did not know that Raymond had drafted his own version of a share transfer agreement. I did not know that he had been slowly, patiently, over many dinners and phone calls, convincing my father that this was not taking something from me. It was correcting an imbalance. It was leveling the field. I found out tonight. From a podium. In front of 200 people. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. Drop a comment, and let me know where you're watching from right now. And what time it is for you. I want to see how far this story reaches. I set my wine glass on the windowsill very slowly. The way you set something down when your hands are not entirely steady but you need them to appear that way. Daniel was already accepting congratulations. He shook hands with men I recognized from my father's golf circle. Paige was photographing the moment on her phone. My uncle Raymond descended from the stage with the unhurried confidence of a man who expected to be thanked. He found me near the window. "Well," he said, with a smile that I think was meant to be warm. "Bit of a surprise." "I know." I looked at him. I said nothing. He shifted his weight. "Your father and I talked about this for a long time. Claire. Daniel needs this. You know how he's been struggling. And you," he gestured in the vague direction of my life, "you're going to be fine. You always land on your feet." There it was. The logic that makes theft feel like fairness. The architecture of a justification so practiced it had become belief. I said, "Raymond, did you file the transfer paperwork through the corporate registry?" He blinked. "We have the agreement drafted." "Yes. Your father signed. We were going to submit it Monday." I nodded slowly. I said, "Okay. We should talk before Monday." He looked relieved. He thought I was going to make peace. He thought I was the reasonable one who would, after a little processing time, understand why this was actually best for everyone. He touched my shoulder briefly, the way people do when they have already decided the conversation is over, and went to find another glass of wine. I pulled out my phone. "I am going to explain something. And I need you to follow me carefully, because the details matter. When I incorporated Northgate Analytical Solutions, I did it in 2 layers. The operating company, the one with the revenue, the contracts. The staff sits inside a holding structure I set up on the advice of my accountant in year 2. The holding company is called Cedarline Group Inc. I am the sole shareholder of Cedarline. Northgate is wholly owned by Cedarline. The share transfer agreement my uncle had drafted, the one my father had signed, transferred shares in Northgate Analytical Solutions directly, as if the operating company were a standalone entity with simple common shares that could be handed from one person to another. It could not, because those shares do not exist in the form Raymond assumed they did. The ownership of Northgate flows entirely through Cedarline, and no one can transfer an interest in Cedarline without my signature, my lawyer's certification, and the approval of a shareholder resolution that requires my consent. My uncle had spent months engineering a transfer of something he did not legally have the ability to transfer. I knew this already. I had known it the moment he said the words from the podium. But there was more. I opened the secure client portal I use for compliance work, and ran a search I had been quietly dreading since Daniel's name came up in a conversation 3 months ago that I was not supposed to hear. My brother's name connected to 2 open matters with the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario. One was a consumer complaint related to the real estate coaching business, improper collection of fees without proper registration. The other was newer. A referral from the Better Business Bureau to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre regarding misrepresentation of services in the renovation venture. Neither had resulted in charges, but both were active. If a share transfer into Daniel's name had been successfully registered, if Raymond's paperwork had somehow found a workaround I hadn't anticipated, Daniel would have become a named director of a licensed financial technology company while under active review by a provincial regulator. That is not a technicality. That is the kind of thing that triggers a compliance audit, freezes licensing renewals, and can result in the regulator suspending the entire company's authorization to operate. My uncle had not stolen my company. He had tried to hand it, gift-wrapped, to a man whose name on the shareholder registry would have triggered a regulatory investigation within 90 days. He wasn't correcting an imbalance. He was burning everything down and calling it love. I put my phone back in my clutch. I felt something settle in my chest. Clean and cold, and very still. This is what I recognize as the moment before a finding. Not anger. Precision. My brother found me 20 minutes later. He was flushed and happy. The way he gets at the beginning of things. Before the reality of maintenance sets in. He hugged me. Which I allowed. He smelled like the cedar cologne he'd worn since high school. I know this is a lot, he said, pulling back to look at me. But Claire, I'm going to do right by it. I'm going to take this seriously. I looked at my brother. Really looked at him. He believed this. In that moment, he genuinely believed he was going to turn over a new leaf. And that belief was real, and it was also irrelevant. I know you will, I said. He squeezed my arm and went back to his celebration. I texted Priya, call me when you can. Tonight if possible. Not urgent, but important. She called in 11 minutes. Which told me she had been waiting for something like this. I told her what Raymond had announced. I told her about the paperwork. I described the structure of the share transfer as Raymond had drafted it and waited through the silence that followed. That doesn't work, Priya said. Finally, he's trying to transfer shares in a subsidiary through a parent entity he doesn't control. I know, I said. So nothing was actually transferred. Not legally. But he doesn't know that. There was another pause. Then Priya said, what do you want to do? I thought about the answer for a moment. I thought about my father, who had stopped watering this particular plant years ago and simply assumed it would keep growing. I thought about Raymond, who had restructured a family narrative so thoroughly that he believed he was the hero of it. I thought about Daniel, who was at this moment accepting toasts on behalf of a company he had no legal claim to and whose ownership he would never be able to demonstrate. I want to document everything, I said, and I want this to stop quietly. Without a courtroom. If at all possible. But I need them to understand clearly that it is stopping. Priya said I can have a letter ready by tomorrow morning. Monday, I said. Let them have the weekend. She laughed. Short and dry. You're kinder than I would be. I thought about that. I did not feel kind. I felt the way I feel at the end of a long audit, not victorious. Not vindicated. Just finished. I found my uncle on the far side of the room near the bar. He was talking to two men I didn't recognize. Laughing at something. I waited at the edge of their conversation until he noticed me and excused himself. Monday, I said, keeping my voice low and even. Before you file anything, I need you to sit down with me and Priya. Priya, he repeated. Your lawyer? Yes. He frowned. Claire. I know this is hard to process, but your father made a decision, Raymond. I said. I need you to hear me clearly. The structure you drafted does not reflect how Northgate is actually owned. You would know this if you had looked at the corporate registry before you filed the agreement for my father to sign. He stared at me. The transfer you announced tonight cannot be legally executed as written. Before you do anything on Monday, I need you to sit with me and Priya and review the actual corporate structure. Because if you file what you have, you will be submitting a materially inaccurate instrument to the Ontario Corporate Registry. That is not a family disagreement. That is a filing error with legal consequences. The laugh lines around his eyes went flat. You're threatening me. I'm informing you, I said. Monday. Priya's office. 10 o'clock. I walked away without waiting for a response. I found my father near the back of the room. He was seated, his knee elevated on a nearby chair, talking to an old friend. He looked up when I approached, and for a moment I saw something cross his face that might have been shame. If it had stayed long enough to identify itself. I sat down beside him. I kept my voice quiet. Dad? I said. I love you. And I need you to understand that what Raymond drafted tonight is not valid. The shares he tried to transfer don't exist in the way he described them. Northgate is owned through a holding company. Raymond didn't check. No one checked. My father looked at me. His eyes were tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. I just wanted Daniel to have something, he said. I know, I said. But you can't give away something that isn't yours to give. He looked at his hands. After a long moment he said, Raymond told me it was straightforward. Raymond was wrong. The silence between us was not the silence of a fight. It was the silence of a man realizing something had been misrepresented to him. And the slow, reluctant work of deciding what to do with that. He said, Is there a way to fix this? Without, he gestured vaguely. All of this becoming something ugly. That's what Monday is for. I said. My father nodded. He looked older than he had an hour ago. I kissed his cheek and said goodnight. The Monday meeting was not dramatic. That is the thing about resolving things correctly. It lacks the spectacle that the wrongdoing had. Priya laid out the corporate structure clearly. With diagrams. Raymond, to his credit, said very little once he understood the error. His face moved through several stages, none of which I will describe in detail. And then he said I should have done a registry search. Yes, Priya said pleasantly. You should have. The agreement was voided. A corrected document, one that my father had the right to sign, and that reflected an actual conversation about what, if anything, could be structured for Daniel through a proper advisory role, was drafted over the following 2 weeks. Daniel was offered a 12-month paid consulting contract with a performance review. No equity. No directorship. Clear deliverables. He signed it. And to be honest, I still don't know how that story ends, but the terms are clean. And the terms are mine. Raymond and I have not had a real conversation since that evening. I don't hold active anger toward him. I hold something quieter and more permanent, a clear knowledge of how he processes the world. And what that means for how much I am willing to share of mine. My father called me 3 weeks after the event. He didn't apologize in the way people mean when they use the word. There was no formal moment. No sitting down to address what had happened directly. Instead, he called to tell me that the maple tree in his backyard had finally been trimmed. The one he'd been meaning to deal with for 2 years. He talked about it for 10 minutes. I think that was his apology. It wasn't enough, and it was also all he had. So I said, the tree sounded like it looked much better now. And he said yes. It did. And we talked for another 20 minutes, about nothing in particular. Some distances close. Some just become familiar. On the drive back from that Monday meeting, I took the long way around Lake Ontario because it was a clear November afternoon and the light on the water was doing something I didn't want to drive past too quickly. I thought about what my uncle had said at that window. Before he understood any of it. You always land on your feet. He meant it as a dismissal. As proof that I didn't need protecting. And therefore didn't need to be considered. But here's what I have come to understand about being the one who lands on her feet. It is not an accident. It is not luck. And it is not character. And it is not some mysterious resilience that certain people are born with. It is the result of 6 years of early mornings and unreturned calls and decisions that no one in that room was present for and will never fully see. I built something. And because I built it carefully, it could not be taken. I pulled off the highway at a rest stop near Oakville. Got a coffee from a Tim Hortons drive-thru. And sat in the parking lot watching the lake. The coffee was too hot to drink. I held it anyway. Just for the warmth of it. Then I drove back to work.